We acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land.
As one of the oldest living cultures on Earth, we celebrate their age-old connections to country, along with the knowledge, determination, patience and generosity of all First Nations people, past and present.
This is Aboriginal land.
Hi, I'm Lucille McCart.
And I'm Chantelle Otten, and we're from Bumble, and this is Give Me a Buzz.
From first dates to heartbreak, we can all relate to the ups and downs of modern dating and relationships.
We're here to give you the inspiration, education, and motivation to navigate any dating fairy tale or dilemma you may find yourself in.
Hello. We are joined today by the incredible author and screenwriter Dolly Alderton.
Yeah, we're pretty excited, and I think everyone in the studio is. It was kind of funny this morning, everyone running around like headless chooks.
There's a lot of people
like, she's getting out of the car.
They were like,
she's walking into the building.
She's here.
I was like,
it's
get
Dolly.
your heads down.
It's Dolly. I was like, get away from the window.
Get away from the window. You look like creepy.
If there's anyone listening that hasn't heard of Dolly, you found yourself in the wrong place, because I'm sure all of our listeners have read Good Material, Everything I Know About Love, Dear Dolly, Ghosts, all amazing books. Everything I Know About Love, I think, is one of my favourite books of all time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was one of the first books that I read where I was like, I feel like I could have written this.
Yeah.
I absolutely couldn't have written it, but it felt like it came from my brain, you know? Like
that's
really,
the biggest compliment when someone says that.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I read, and then I made all my friends read it. So we're so excited to be able to talk to the woman that came up with it.
It's so weird. It's now like, I'm now getting, because it's been nearly 7 years since it came out.
A baby. It's a full-grown,
I know.
child now.
But it's now also getting this, second, the Gen Zs are coming through
the second
now.
wind.
Has it been on TikTok or something? Like they've got the...
Oh my God, have I? Yeah.
I was on this morning because I was having a look and seeing what, how people were reviewing it that were younger than us. And people were just like, Dolly has taught me everything I know about how to love myself and my girlfriends and my friendship groups, and it's made me navigate the world and how I approach dating differently.
It's so nice hearing that, particularly from very young mouths. I mean, the thing that's been so weird about TikTok, which I was phobic of because I just didn't need another platform, is there's a girl on there and I need to track her down. She took a clip from my audiobook of me doing a soundbite of Everything I Know About Love, put a Phoebe Bridgers song underneath it, made it a kind of 8-second clip. It went crazy, and because of that, having bombed in America, I then was in the New York Times bestseller list for a year and #1 in Spain for a year.
Okay,
because
icon.
of this
you
chick.
We need to
I know.
find
I
her.
need to do a shout out to her and be like, I want to take you out for lunch, and I want her to go buy her a handbag, whatever she wants. But it really made me realise the whole TikTok thing and how it's it immediately sounds like a boomer. The whole TikTok thing.
The whole
TikTok thing, and the fact that it's brought this younger generation to my work. It has really been a reminder to me of how uncool and uninteresting it is to be a Luddite as you get older, actually, because I do have a propensity to go that way.
Okay. Yeah.
And actually, any author who isn't seriously engaging with their audience on TikTok and BookTok and how people are coming to their work and how different people of different backgrounds and different ages are discovering literature now is an idiot who's not interested in that.
It's very tempting to be like, oh, that's for the kids.
But it is hard being online.
But I'm not on TikTok, and I won't be on TikTok, but I make sure that the people I work with are completely across TikTok and how my work's performing there, because I just think it's so democratized as a space for readers. Traditionally, reading, I think, has been quite an elitist activity in the last 20 years in literature and the way that people have been locked out. And I think for it to be so democratized now, and for it to be, and also it's really raising books up, unknown authors. It's really breaking authors. I just think you've got to be interested in that now. And I spent my whole 20s just tweeting about hating Taylor Swift and how I was listening to dusty old LPs. I'm so cringed out. I think that's such a luxury of a young person.
It is.
To be so obsessive about the past. So now I'm just really, now I'm just really interested in how young people are engaging with books. So anyway, I will never be on TikTok because I don't need to watch more hours of girls telling me how to use the Dyson Airwrap, which is how I
I'll
spend
still
like
never know.
hours.
Do you know how?
It doesn't work, that Airwrap. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
I just love being consumers. Anyway, let's keep moving.
We start all of our episodes this season with what is the worst dating advice you've ever received?
God, that's a good question. What's the worst dating advice? I mean, I feel like I've given out some pretty terrible advice over the years.
It can be advice you've given or received.
Yeah, why don't you dub yourself in?
My worst advice. For a while, I definitely was of the opinion that you have to like flood the market. That basically the more it's a numbers game and the more that you date, the more likely it is that you're going to meet someone.
Yeah, hit
and
a
I
target.
don't know if I believe that now, actually. And I think that can be counterproductive because I think it can engender a real exhaustion and ennui. Dating should be fun. There's so much that's talked about the benefits of being in a relationship, but there are real benefits of being single. And if you've been single for a long time, when you do meet your person, you will miss it in ways that you can't predict. And the idea of on any Friday night, you could like put on your favourite album and pour a glass of wine and put on a nice dress and be like, who knows who I'm going to connect with tonight and who knows where this is going to lead. It's a real adventure being single. And I think only do it when it feels like that. And to force yourself through this like relentlessness of having to meet as many men as possible, I just think that is the mistake with dating because it's meant to be fun.
Dating's for the story. That's what we always talk about.
Yeah.
Go for the story. And then you can come home and tell your girlfriends whatever crazy
and I
story
think
you
there's so
had.
much out there at the moment about like dating burnout, you know, and people are really exhausting themselves. And what we always say is exactly what you just said is like, it's meant to be fun. So if you're not feeling it, don't do it.
Don't do it.
If you're in that mindset of I'm exhausted, you're not going to like the people you meet anyway.
Yeah, totally. And I also think as well, there was definitely a period when I was single in my early 30s. My early 30s was like a really tricky time. And I remember there was definitely a period where, particularly post-lockdown, where I felt like there had been wasted years.
Yes.
Where I remember I was working on my TV show and one of my producers, it was all like kick-ass women in their 40s that were producing it, who were through the other side of all the stuff I was going through.
Yeah, okay.
Friends all having babies. Trying to work out if I wanted kids, trying to work out how to find the person to do that with, when I have time to do that. They'd all been through it and their advice was really sage. And I remember one of my execs saying to me, every time we'd finished a day of work, she would hear what I was doing with my evening and it made her realise how much she loved being in her late 40s because that feeling of like, I've got to optimise every night.
Yes.
Yeah,
When someone's like, do you want to meet for dinner? And they say, do you want to come round to my house? Me and my husband will cook for you. And in your head, the panic is going, I need to be out.
Yeah.
I need to be out in the world because famously so many people get chatted up in a restaurant or whatever.
Yeah.
But this thing of like, I put this pressure on myself, not only when my career was like hitting its peak and it was really tiring and there was a lot of pressure on me, I put this pressure on myself to be like, I have to optimise every second that I'm free to potentially meet someone. And that is a bad vibe.
Well, it just sounds like you were, you know, not protecting your own peace and energy at that time.
Totally.
Yeah. You were doing what you thought society needed you to do to get to that next step that you had in your sights.
Exactly. And I think drilling down, like that said, so many women in their 30s write into me who are really, really anxious about meeting someone and whether they'll meet someone and if they'll have a family or if they'll get married. And I think instead of working out strategy, drilling down into why.
Why do you want that?
Yeah, and why do the minutes and the evenings and the years of 30-something life suddenly feel so much scarier than 20-something life? Why is that?
I relate to what you're saying for not necessarily from a like romantic perspective, but when I first moved to New York, I was like, I said yes to like every single thing because I was like, oh my God, I live in New York, so I have to go to this bar on a Tuesday and watch someone perform some random thing I've never seen before that I don't care, that I'm not going to remember who they are and what they did. And then like a couple of months in, I was like, I'm exhausted and I'm sick and I'm tired and I'm actually meant to be here to be doing a job that's really important.
Totally.
And now I'm
it's
like,
protecting the peace.
And now
is
I'm
such
like,
a good
oh,
way of-
actually, like, yes, it's amazing to be here, but I'm allowed to stay home on a Friday night
Yeah.
and like have a bath if that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it's the same with dating.
And so I always remember, like, I went on a date when I remember exactly who it was. It was a really nice guy. We only met once. And I was 31 and he was a bit older than me. And he wasn't eating or drinking anything. He was obsessed with his body.
Oh,
He was just having like skinny bit, like vodka soda or whatever.
that sounds like a fun date.
Yeah, just watching me like hoover up all the bar snacks.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to him, he was talking about how much he like hated his workout routine and he hated what he was eating and he he found it such a schlep. And I was like, well, when are you going to not be like this? And he was like, the day after my wedding. And I remember feeling so sad for him because I know so many people who have that attitude of like, I have to be online all the time. I have to be out all the time. I have to be saying yes stuff I don't want to do. I have to be on a diet. I have to be doing all this stuff until I find my partner and then I can have some peace.
And then I can let it all go.
And live the way that I want to live. And I just think that is so desperately sad.
I think all of my like closest friends are like pretty cool, chill people, but I've definitely like encountered a lot of people over my life where I'm like, oh my God, you're torturing yourself.
Yeah.
And I've also known a lot of, I think it's mostly women, but not all women, where it's like they just want to find the partner, who that person is kind of takes a backseat. And then you end up with someone that's like, you got the wedding and you got the kids and you got the house and you got all of the things, you hit all the milestones. But do you even like that person that you have to spend all your time with and sleep in a bed with every night?
Well, I think the person that you're meant to be with will want you to be happy with your sense of self. I'm a therapist. I'm a sexologist. I help people with their sex lives and their relationships. And
Sexologist is
such a nice word, isn't it? I'm a sexologist.
I'm obsessed with that word.
But one thing that I see a lot is people coming in and they're like, especially after having kids or, you know, long-term relationships, and they're like, I just don't know who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to look at your sense of differentiation, your sense of self outside of this relationship, outside of these roles that you've picked up as well.
Yeah.
Who is that person? A lot of the time they don't even know or they can't remember or they've never really had a strong sense of self.
That's so interesting. I think as well, it's like when you're so raised in a culture of like heteronormative fear and panic, I think there's like so many women I know, and I totally understand this, were so hell-bent on finding a partner and having children that they hadn't anticipated that merging your life with another person and then creating all these other lives is not a subtraction of problems. Like,
No, they're still there.
Or some may go away, but you're
problems.
making new challenges for yourself.
Yeah.
And actually, I think so many women I know, and I've been really lucky in that if I do have kids, I'll be one of the last of my friends to do it, which is like they were really a flock of canaries down the mine for me because I've really seen all this stuff I could never have predicted. What you lose, what's really difficult.
Yeah.
The unpredictable nature of bringing a human into the world and who that human might be and the challenges they might have. I've really seen that, like, it's so easy to obsess over whether you're going to be a mother and not think about whether you want to raise a child.
Yeah.
I've had so many of my friends say I didn't know it would be like this.
All my friends say that.
And I also really identify with what you're saying because I'm 34. I'm at the age where a lot of my friends either have kids or are starting to have kids. And I've got great relationships with my friends' kids. And people say to me, you know, does it make you want them? And I'm like, it's actually made me want them less. Or not less, but
I think it's less and more at the same time.
Like, I actually now see how hard it is.
Yeah.
And so now I have this new perspective of I would only ever do that in a very specific set of circumstances where I had a partner that wanted it more than I did.
No, exactly.
It's so interesting. But people's external assumption is that I would, because I am so close with these kids in my life, that I must want them.
It's a really sobering moment I had a couple of years ago is my friend who has a lot of kids. Well, a lot for now. Has 3 kids, which I think is a lot
that's
for
a
now.
lot. That is a lot.
And she was talking about I was asking about the challenges of having a third and how difficult it was to balance time. And I just said to her out of interest, I was like, what would your like dream day be if I could grant you a dream day tomorrow? And she was like, well, I'd wake up at like 8:39 and then I'd go do a yoga class and then I'd have a long lunch by myself and read a book and then hang out with my husband, just us two all afternoon and have dinner and get a bit drunk and shag and then like go to bed at maybe like midnight and yeah, like that would be heaven. And I remember thinking
It's like a regular day.
that is fucking every day of my life. That is fucking every day of my life.
One of my friends, I won't name her, told me that the first 6 weeks of her first-born child's life were the worst 6 weeks of her life by none.
Yeah.
And
Sorry to hear.
I so appreciate my friends that are honest about this stuff.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is as well is like, I don't know, it's such a delicate balance. Are you guys Laura Marling fans?
I don't know
She's
who
a
that
folk.
is.
She's this folk singer that's like just had this incredible album out, and she is the exact same. I think bar a year, she's like the same age as me.
Yeah.
So she's been this incredible, and I love her music. She's been this incredible musician throughout my life because she started making music when she was 17, and it was all about like cool musician boys that were detached, which is what my life was. And then in her early 20s, it was about like being a creative person and having ambition. Basically, every chapter of her life has mirrored the chapters of the generation of women's life who are listening to her. So it's this magical capsule. She's just done this album. She's had a baby and she's written this album about the joy of being a mother.
Oh.
And the paradise of having a newborn baby. And
How does that make you feel?
Like, kind of like I needed to hear it a bit.
Okay.
I realised there's so much truth.
Actually,
because also I think that there has been such understandably, a backlash against like smug mummy culture.
Yeah, that's
that it
a shame.
hasn't left much space for women, understandably, I think, to talk about the fun of it and the enjoyment of it. So it's weird. It's like you want the truth, but then you equally don't want to. Like my friend said to me, my best friend, Farley, who I wrote about in Everything I Know About Love. I remember saying to her a couple of years ago, she's got 2 children and she loves them. But she's very honest with me about the challenges of motherhood. And I was like, it's weird since I've got into my mid-30s, which was the age I was worried about like, you know, not having kids or not making a decision by that point. It's like the further in I get, the more I'm putting it off.
Yeah.
And she was like, wow, I'm really surprised by that.
Yeah.
I was like, are you?
Yeah.
Are you really surprised?
you're
Can we think about all the text exchanges we've had over the last couple of years? Why would you be surprised?
You're part of this. You are part of
and
this.
those other mums are the worst fucking PRs for motherhood that I have ever.
It's been such a 180 because it used to be this whole like, oh, motherhood is bliss. And now it's like, I just cleaned shit off the walls.
Yeah.
Oh, no, but I wouldn't change it. You're like,
Yeah.
I know. It's so confusing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think where we get into this place with the like, do you have kids, do you not have kids debate, and the divisions that can happen between friends that are mothers and not, is that I just know that they're telling the truth, that it's like some of the worst, most challenging times, and that it's the happiest they've been.
Yeah.
That's very confusing for people to get their
hard
head
to
around.
understand.
But
Very
I do
hard to
believe
understand.
them.
This episode is brought to you by Bumble. We know making the first move on dating apps can be a little bit daunting.
Luckily, Bumble's opening moves feature makes it super easy to get the conversation going straight away.
Shanti, what's your opening move? I already know it's going to be a little bit flirty.
Well, mine is tell me something that you're passionate about. What about you?
Oh, mine is what's your favourite thing you've learned from TikTok?
I love it. So on Bumble, you can either write your own opening move or choose from one of the many suggestions and then sit back and wait for your matches to come to you.
This is your sign to download the app and date on your terms. Find Bumble in the App Store or on Google Play.
So I have a question. Would you have any advice for those women who are in their 30s now and starting to feel maybe unsure, especially if their friendship groups are slipping away? You know, I think we have quite a few people in our lives that, especially because I think as you get older, for a lot of people, it's harder to make friends.
Totally.
But I think I know quite a few people that are just like, I feel depressed because my best friends have now got their attention focused on their children and their relationships. And they're like, I don't have anyone to go out with. I don't have anyone to party with anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's different to New York. New York, you can go out and you can meet people who are all having fun and all doing the same thing, and you continue to go out into your, you know, whatever age. But
New York
here
is
in
not reflective
Australia,
of the rest of the world.
no, here in Australia, you know, you don't really go out that much.
So interesting. LA's like that. I wonder why that is. Is it because it's like an outdoorsy city that?
It's a daytime city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, and it's a question that I get asked a lot. I mean, the first thing I'll say is when a group of female friends, when people first start having children, it's a bomb that goes off in the houses of all these friendships and these friendship groups. Everything is detonated, and it's like a bad time for everyone. I think it's really, really bad for the people without kids. I think it's really bad for the women who don't want kids. I think it's really bad for the women who don't have kids but do want kids. And I think it's really, really difficult for the mums. That's like the first 5 years. So for me, that was like 30, 35. 35 to 40 is spent going into those houses with your beloved friends and looking at the rubble. And being like, what can we get out of this? It feels like this huge explosion happened. What is salvageable? And some of those friendships, I think, don't make it. I think that's exception, not the rule. I think most women I know, after a lot of kind of very honest conversations about how the other person was made to feel during that time, most women I know that come out of it even closer. So I would say, first of all, time is really important. And then for the people who are single or without kids, who find themselves with these like holes of time in their calendar and no one to hang out with, I would say the most important thing, particularly if you're single, the most important thing you can do is don't go out of your way. That obsession that you have with trying to find the man that you want to be with, like, that's a waste of time. Go and find single friends.
Yeah, go find new friends.
That is like the number one thing that transforms the life of single women in their 30s, is whether they have other single women in their lives to not only normalise the life and into your 40s and 50s and 60s, not even just to normalise the life that you've chosen to have or the life that has happened to you, but to celebrate it and for it to be cool and exciting.
And diversify your friend group as well. Like, make friends with older women, younger women.
Totally.
You know, not everyone needs to be the exact same age as you and from the area that you live in.
Exactly.
You know.
Okay, so let's switch gears now, because we can yap all day, but we need to talk about good material. So for those who haven't read it, you are talking about love and also about heartbreak, but you're writing from a man's perspective. And I listened to a podcast. You said you interviewed 15 men in order to write this book, which is quite impressive.
Talking to 15 men is very impressive.
It's a good
probably the most conversational men I've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the end of the book, you flip to a woman's perspective on the heartbreak. I want to know, what do you think is different about the way men and women deal with heartbreak?
Such a good question. I mean, I think there's a timeline thing. In the immediate aftermath of a breakup, in fact, one of my characters in the book says this to Andy, the protagonist. In the immediate aftermath of a breakup, I think most men, from what I have seen, there's something about the way they process it. They move on immediately. Because I basically think men are incapable of being single, which is like the great myth of gender, that I think that the conversations we have is like, women really struggle to be single. I think women are much better at being single and on their own.
I think the biggest myth about dating and relationships is that being in a relationship or a marriage benefits women, and that's what women need, when actually all of the research, health data, mental health data says that men are better off in relationships, men live longer if they're married, and men are not good at surviving solo. And it's like this big myth that we've created that women are these ones desperate to be in relationships.
I couldn't agree more.
And I don't think it's true at all.
And I think where we've gotten confused as well in dating app culture is the number of times women I know have thought they were in a relationship with a man, and it's like, oh no, this is him being single. Like, you're hanging out twice a week,
You're like,
and
we're in a relationship.
Yeah. And actually it's like an incubator for them.
Yes.
Just because actually the alternative, which is being properly on your own, they wouldn't do.
Yes. So it's like, I'm going to maintain these like situationships.
Exactly.
Until I find the person that I want to be in a relationship with. And that's because we also
like
talk
a stepping
lot about
stone.
getting ghosted, and people are always like, I don't know what happened. And I'm like, the unfortunate like reality is that he was probably dating lots of people and you were one of them, and he's picked the person that he was more invested in for whatever reason, nothing to do with you, and he's a baby, and so he's just cut off all the other people because that's kind of the way it happens.
So true.
Yeah.
Also, if you're about to get ghosted, the sign, I think, if you're about to get ghosted is a man saying to you that he thinks he's falling in love with you. Or that he
and
wants
then you
you
never
to
see
meet
him again.
or that he
Spiral
wants
is
you
about
to
to
meet his
happen.
parents.
Yeah.
Or
Like
There's a
that
great
is when you
TikTok
know.
on that.
Yeah.
Or like the conversation we were having with Sarah yesterday, they'll invite you to something like in like 6 months' time.
Yeah.
Like a 6 month,
Yes,
you know,
so true.
like come to this wedding with me next year.
We should go
you
on
know?
a trip to that place next summer.
Yeah.
They're about to literally
You're
drop
about to
off.
get dumped.
You're like,
You're about to get
well, it's been nice.
It's so weird.
It's really funny, isn't it?
That was the end of my 20s. That was my entire life.
Yeah.
Just men saying to me on date one, they're like, I think we're gonna have 3 children. And then me being like saying that they were going to marry me on date 3, but then me being like, shall we be exclusive? And they're like, whoa.
I once had a man walk out of my apartment and say to me on his way out the door, save a spot for me at your birthday dinner. And I never heard from him again.
It's a classic. It's such a classic.
Wow.
They love doing it.
Wow.
It was my speciality for a number of years. It was my speciality of men being like, meet my mum, I'm coming to your birthday dinner, let's go on a trip, let's get married, let's have children,
isn't it?
and then immediately gone.
And then they lose their minds. Do you ever feel like then you need to get revenge on these people? Or like, do you feel like you need to like hunt them down and be like, what the fuck?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I never believed in revenge. I believed in redress. So I believed like you don't get to...
I have done that.
I've done this.
Where I remember one guy...
I once made a man come and break up with me to my face.
This is what I used to make them do. And they hate that. I think there was something about the power dynamic of ghosting that upset me.
In my case, I said, not good enough. Come and say it to my face.
Yeah.
And he came with my favourite dumplings in hand. And
Psychopath.
Well, I
Actually,
mean,
like all forgiven.
if we go back to good material,
Yeah.
some men can be really in love and so impressed by successful, confident women. But I think they ultimately find it challenging as well. There was a few more kind of harsh questions instead of challenging that were originally used in these questions. But I think that people can be very challenged by a successful woman.
Nearly every woman I know who is making a lot of money, is really successful in their field or in the public eye, is really, really struggling to find any man to commit to them. It's so weird. I mean, there's a reason why Taylor Swift got so many albums out of it. It's like a real thing that's happening. Okay, so here's my theory. This is why I think Jack Berger from Sex and the City series 5 and 6 should be...
familiar.
I don't know if you guys know about that programme. I think he should be studied at schools because I think he represents a modern type of man that has caused heterosexual dating to become really, really fragmented, which is a man who has an idea of the type of woman he wants to be with, and he's really, really good at being friends with those women. So he's like a woke bro, he's an ally, he knows our language because he's online, so he knows, he's had access to these women's rooms, so he knows what we want and what we hate and politically where we sit. He speaks the language. And he's got like a bunch of amazing female friends. He's probably really close to his sister. He's like best friends with all his bros' wives. They're like, he's the best guy.
Yes.
He's such a like, and
I'm
then
thinking about this.
and he has this idea of the woman he wants to be with, and the man he wants to be with a woman like that. But when push comes to shove, he doesn't, it's too emasculating, it's too challenging, it's too much hard work. He would prefer to be with like someone younger than him,
a bit more traditional,
who's kind of unchallenging and who offers him a kind of simpler dynamic where he's in charge and he's the more powerful party.
And do you think because they're evolved enough to like maintain female friendships, they then don't like it when they are challenged because they're still a man at the end of the day, and so but because they are this sort of more evolved, woke version, they don't like it being pointed out that they might need to adapt.
Hate that.
Yeah, because they're like, no, women like me.
Yeah, totally. And the thing that complicates it is a lot of women have set me up, women I love.
With men like that.
Yeah. And they don't see like what happens when like sexual ego and sexual desire, all this stuff that comes into play in romantic relationships that's kind of secret in a lot of ways from your friendships. They don't see any of that. So there'd be like so many times where women would be like, he's the nicest guy.
Yeah.
I don't understand what's happened.
Yeah. Interesting.
And actually the other day I had people around for dinner and there was a guy there who I didn't know. I'd met him for the first time that night. And my male friend who'd brought him said to me, what did you think of him? I was like, he was so lovely, this new guy. He was like helping me with the washing up. He was standing with a glass of wine, talking to me about books. And he was like, great listener, really funny. I was like, I bet he's the loveliest guy. And I bet he is absolutely horrendous to women that he dates. And he was like, yeah, got it in one. How did you know? How did you know? I was like, I just know now. I just know. I get that sense of the gap. And I feel sorry for these guys because they're living, there's a huge gap between the desire of what they want to be and who they are.
Doing. They don't get why these relationships are failing either.
Yeah.
Because they're like, but women like me.
Yeah.
I'm good to women.
Yeah.
And there's a real disconnect there with like what they're doing.
Totally.
So interesting. What I have observed is there's actually a lot of successful men in New York who aren't looking to date successful women because they're really into that power dynamic.
Totally.
So the fact that I have a good job, it's kind of a bit like, it's not off-putting to them, but they're like, they'd rather be several steps above the person that they're dating professionally.
They want to be the provider.
So that their sort of power in that sense is not questioned.
Totally. And I also do understand, and I went through a phase in my early 30s of dating much younger guys, and it was a massive mistake. But when I look back, I understand why I did that, because work was so intense and the day-to-day of my life and the pressures that were on me and what I had to deliver was so intense that I did suddenly understand that trope of men in their 30s and 40s who were like nailing it at work, wanting to come home to a Betty Draper, because there is something about not having to think too much about home.
It makes me think about timelines of love, though. Like, do you think men and women have different timelines of love? And our producers were talking about the taxi cab theory. Do you know what the taxi cab theory is?
Both lights have to be on at the same time.
So this one's really interesting. It's the idea that when men decide they're ready for commitment and ready for a relationship, it's like the light goes on and the next person that gets in is the one.
Yeah.
Because I think that I've definitely seen a lot of men in my life who, most of them are with great women, but I'm like, you fucked around for most of your 20s and then it was like a switch flipped.
I know.
And all of a sudden they were like, and I don't actually know if, even though the women that a lot of them are with are fantastic, like I actually don't know if, because you fucked over a lot of fantastic women before that, it's like once they decide they're ready, the next woman that comes into their path, they're like,
totally,
this is it.
Yeah.
I think I know a lot of women in their 30s, particularly now in their late 30s, who are single, who feel pretty angered about that, actually, that they feel like they wasted years on men who wouldn't commit.
Yeah.
And now they have to see on Instagram, or they have to hear about these guys who just like, suddenly they decided they wanted to be in a committed relationship and they didn't do any therapy and they didn't really have to go out dating and they didn't have to think about biological time. They just kind of decided and then ostensibly they have everything that like they have the package of what these my friends really want, but but it's kind of baseless. It's like it is totally a coincidental timing thing. Yeah, it's really rough. That I know a lot of women who are really angered by that,
because it's that classic thing of you break up with someone because they don't want commitment, and then 6 months later they're engaged. Or
I know I do say that to like every woman who writes into my advice column saying, I really, really like this guy, but he like couldn't commit to me, and like he doesn't believe in the institution of relationships.
Every man that's ever said that has ended up married.
That's what I say to them. I was like, I'm just going to warn you about something. Within a year, he's going to be in a really serious relationship. So just prep for that.
Yeah.
It's not you.
When that light is off, when they're not ready for a commitment, doesn't matter what you look like.
No.
Doesn't matter how funny you are.
No.
Doesn't matter how smart you are. It will not work out.
No.
I just have seen so many women like rip themselves into pieces being like, oh, if I was thinner, if I
know.
had a better job. Actually, it's none of that.
Which is why the Tortured Poets department was such a good album.
Fantastic album.
Because it's basically about that, about what it is to totally fall in love with a guy who the light is completely off.
Yeah.
It's so fucking good, that album.
Interesting.
She's got some bangers, doesn't she?
Yeah.
One of the things that has always resonated with me so much in your work, your friendships with the women in your life. How do you want people to think about what value they should place on them? What do you wish you'd understood about that, or what do you wish more women understood about that when they're sort of going through their 20s and 30s where everything feels about finding romantic love?
Yeah.
I think, well, when I wrote Everything I Know About Love, it was, by the time I wrote the last chapter, I was trying to work out what tied everything together, these stories from my 20s. And I think it was only then really in like real time when I was writing that book that when I went back and looked at all the stories I'd written and all the stories I'd lived through, what I thought, because we place such a premium on romantic love, I think unconsciously what I had thought was the single years of your life where you're living with friends and hanging out with friends and going to the movies with friends and spending Saturday nights with friends and hungover on a Sunday with friends, that's like a purgatorial time. That's when you're waiting for your life to begin, and life begins when you fall in love and maybe have a family or get married and live with a man. And actually, it was only when I read back all those stories that I realised that I hadn't just been hanging out, I'd been falling in love. I had been doing the thing that we know are the markers of these long romantic relationships, of like having different experiences, meeting each other's family, getting to know each other through challenging times and celebratory times, being there in the mundane, being there in the adventurous moments. So everything that applies to a relationship and how that builds and grows and what that does for you for the rest of your life and how that enriches you, bar a sexual connection, is exactly the same as friendship. It's just that there's a cultural premium on romance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is really wild to think that, you know, when you're eating Chinese food on the couch or, you know, doing a drive to see someone's parents, that like you're building something.
Totally.
So we could keep yapping with you for another
Couple of
hour
hours.
or all day, but we do have to let you go soon. So we end all of our segments with or our episodes rather, with a reader DM, and we have a special Dear Dolly.
Yes,
been
this was sent in
submitted.
for you.
Earlier this year, I went on a weekend away with two close friends. I'm in a long-term relationship. One friend is married and the other is single. We're all about 30. The weekend was lovely, but upon returning, my single friend wrote on her lifestyle blog about how she felt all of our conversations circled around her being single and us being in monogamous relationships, essentially hinting about how boring we are because we're happy. It was hurtful to read the things she wrote about me rather than have a conversation face-to-face. After some emotional texts back and forth and drunken hugs when we saw each other, we decided to draw a line under it and move on. However, I can't seem to get over the hurtful words she posted online for all of our friends to read. I find it really hard to be with her in social situations and practically switch off when she starts speaking or telling stories about the great sexual experiences she's had. I don't think she understands why it hurt me, and I also recognize that maybe I don't know how to talk to her about her fun single life without offending her.
Oh, good one.
When I got this, it was so... my reaction to it was so interesting because when I get problems from people, I always think it's my job to look at it in the round and to empathise with every single person who's involved with it, particularly the person who's being complained about. And it's very rare that I have a very strong feeling of like, I'm so coming out to defend for this one person in this situation. And I could tell that the person who wrote this really thought that I was going to be like anti the chaotic blogging friend. And it's like, no, of course I would die for the chaotic blogging friend who's been single her whole life.
Like, that's
Maybe
me.
you are boring.
So what? Like,
Maybe you are boring.
You're like, did one of my friends write this?
Yeah, I just was like, I so know the unsaid thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but my theory was, what I can pick up in the tone of this letter is that this woman is being really patronising to her friend, and that she's not taking her friend's single life seriously. And she's making her friend, who already, if they're in their 30s, is feeling alienated and isolated by the cultural pressures that are on women in their 30s to get married, that the way she's trying to claw back any sort of dignity is being like, I'm going to write about this on my blog.
Well, I just think like the red flags are especially around, I switch off when she talks about her single life and her single sex life as well. It's like, that's probably why you're in the blog, babe, because
She's picking up on
can't.
that,
She's picking up on the fact that you're switching off when she's talking about herself, and she needs to share her experiences, and you should be enthusiastic about those experiences as well.
Totally, not judgmental.
No.
She's writing them on a blog because she can't share them with you because, as you've said, you switch off when she talks about it. So she's found another outlet for that. And so maybe the question to ask is like,
Why are you so triggered?
why do you switch off?
Why are you so triggered about
Why
this?
are you so scared?
Yeah.
It's like she's phobic of her friend's single life.
Yeah, like it's not contagious.
Yeah.
You know, if you listen to her stories about the great sex she's having and her single life, your partner's not going to break up with you.
No.
You know, but it does make me wonder, like, what is it that you're switching off from? Like, why don't you want to hear about that? Because that's your friend.
Yeah, I think it sounds like, you know what, the woman who's in the relationship has obviously changed and adapted to the relationship and can't relate.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I just think she might be also, and I'm totally assuming here, but is she so triggered because she kind of low-key agrees that maybe she's just not the person that she used to be, or she's not someone that her friends can come to. She obviously can't create a safe space for people to come share their individualized experiences. So instead of that, she's just becoming extremely defensive.
I'd love you to be my therapist.
She's very good. She's very
Well,
good.
That's very, very
Lucille is
good.
my therapist. I think we, you know, at the end of the day, we believe a lot in accountability, and I believe a lot in what did I bring to the table here for this reaction to happen.
Yeah.
And I cannot see any accountability in this letter.
Totally.
Yeah.
And also I think what you've read there is, I did not pick up on, but I think is so, I can see that this is the unsaid, is that the complaint on both sides is about a changed dynamic, and she's not taking account, and she thinks the changed dynamic is because she's happy.
Neither of them
than,
are creating a safe space for each other.
Yeah.
Like you, Dolly,
Yeah.
I relate more to the single friend. Yeah. I've never been the friend in the relationship when I only have one single friend. I can imagine it doesn't feel good to be made to feel like you're boring because you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
And so it makes me feel like, I wonder if I've ever, like, subconsciously or consciously, like, made a friend feel like I think they're boring because they're not living the same lifestyle as me.
Yeah.
Like, that probably doesn't feel good. But at the same time, this person is very aware that they're switching off when their friend is talking to them. And so I think it's worth asking yourself why you're doing that and what are you afraid to hear, you know?
Yeah.
Or what are you not wanting to acknowledge there?
You guys should take over my column, honestly.
Well, babe, we can chat about that after.
This has been just my favourite episode
Oh, this has
already.
been so fun.
I wish
Thank
you could stay all day because I have 4,000
too.
other questions that I could ask you.
Yeah.
But thank you
Thank you so
much.
I have loved talking to you guys. Thank you so much.
How amazing was that, having Dolly on? We're huge fangirls. If you want to hear more from Dolly, you can follow her on Instagram at Dolly Alderton, and you can buy her new book, Good Material, at all good bookshops. If you want to let us know what you thought of the episode or ask us more questions, you can give us a follow or send us a message on at Bumble_Australia.
Yeah, give us a follow, leave us a review only if it's good, and then share it with a friend.
5 stars only.
5 stars only, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.